For years, environmental advocates and timber interests have been fighting over something called a habitat conservation plan. The plan would set aside parts of state forests in Tillamook and Clatstop counties, prohibiting logging to protect endangered species. But that would in turn reduce timber harvests and the tax revenues that flow to the counties and places like the Jewell School District, which brought the lawsuit. John DiLorenzo is representing the district.
The long and the short of it is they're going to lose about 35% of their revenues that are going to have to be made up somehow.
And while the Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP as it's known, certainly motivated the lawsuit, that's not really the crux of it.
There happens to be a law, it's an Oregon administrative rule, that requires that the department must at least break even on its share of the revenues. It's not doing that.
In 2010, the Department of Forestry adopted the Northwest Oregon Forest Management Plan. And it does stipulate the department be able to cover its operational costs with the timber revenue it creates. In a letter to State Forester Cal Mukomoto, DiLorenzo noted that the department had operational losses of more than $13 million in 2022 and 2023.
We are asking for a court to rule that the department has two choices. Choice number one is increase the harvest revenues so Jewell can continue to offer the quality education it offers, or two, share in the sacrifice that it is expecting of all these local governments and sharply reduce its own staff.
Of course, not everyone agrees with that logic.
Yeah, it's just not as cut and dry as I believe the school district and Mr. DiLorenzo are attempting to lay it out to be.
That's Grace Brayler, Wildlands Director for Cascadia Wildlands.
Oregon law requires that the state forester manage state forests to secure a wide range of values, not solely just timber harvest.
When you look at the forest plan, it does indeed say the department has to cover its costs. But it also says the department must, quote, conserve forest lands by maintaining state forest land base, and that it is required to, quote, grow and harvest trees to produce timber, revenue, jobs, and habitat for native species. Brayler argued the timber revenue is just one of many things the department must consider when deciding how to manage our forests.
There are a lot of jobs, a lot of values that come out of our state forests. Thinking of the fishing industry that has been heavily impacted by poor water quality, drought, and these environmental impacts that are exacerbated by climate change and the biodiversity loss crisis that we're facing.
But that also doesn't change the fact that timber revenues to places like the Jewell School District, they're likely to take a hit in the coming years. Governor Kotek has promised to allocate state money to offset those losses in the next legislative session. But DiLorenzo, he said there's only so much that money would fix.
It's one thing to have revenue to pay our teachers, but we need to have students to educate too. And we're not going to have students if all the parents have to move away because there are no jobs.
Still, Brayler said the state needs to take a hard look at the way these kinds of school districts are funded.
I think this gets at a much broader conversation around how to sustainably fund those essential services that may be and for some counties more than others will be impacted by the implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan.
But she said it should not come at the expense of the forest.
It's our strong belief that shouldn't rely on over-extracting natural resources that are to be managed for the benefit of all Oregonians, not just certain locations or a select few.
Cale Williams, KGW News.